Transmitting from the Mojave Wilderness in Joshua Tree, California. Now is the time for Desert Oracle Radio, the voice of the desert.
They don't want crusading journalists looking to bust up cults?
I was just trying to go to the night baths, but we were already in Big Sur, and you can't reserve by telephone, which is why I was calling them on the payphone, and we didn't have phone service to reserve it on the internet. So it was actually just a very sort of sad near miss.
Since everything's relevant.
Everything is relevant.
On this show, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you know, everything... I have a sneaking suspicion that everything is relevant all the time in general, which is terrifying.
But it is. It is true. And sometimes it takes a little strand of RNA shooting out of people's nostrils to really illustrate the point.
It really is at tremendous speed. I spent most of today buying, hand sanitizer and frozen vegetables. And it's this, it's sort of an interesting pre-apocalyptic feeling that I hope does not actually come to pass.
You're doing it, so you're prepping.
I am prepping. I'm prepping a little bit. I've been thinking a lot about the preppers. But, of course, the situation has already come to pass for so many people. So,
yeah.
I can make jokes about buying frozen vegetables. But really, it sucks. Like, it's bad.
And it's already here, so...
Yeah, exactly. It is.
I'm not...
Yeah, I mean,
are
you
sure
just thinking about it all the time? I feel like I'm thinking about it all the time. I'm not sure what to do either.
I think I came to some sort of peace yesterday. It was kind of a little self-convincing, but if it is like it looks like, that 40 to 70% of people are going to get this in the next year, and
yeah.
Then, what the hell can anybody do? What's the point? I
mean, for most of us, it probably won't manifest as anything other than something like the flu. But
not that. There's apparently a lot of otherwise healthy people who test positive who've had no symptoms ever.
Did you actually? There was a Reddit thread going around, and I don't know its credibility, of somebody saying that he came back to New York after a trip in Asia, and he was feeling ill, and he went to the doctor, and his doctor called the CDC for permission to test him for the coronavirus, and they said no. They wouldn't let him get whatever kit it is that they use to test, so he just went home and self-quarantined instead.
Oh, that
seems great.
Well. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems great. I definitely want to just have to rely on everybody's best judgment.
Yeah, because that has proved such a winning strategy for us in this past century. Yeah, we'll end up doing what's best for all of us.
Yeah.
So you went to something that, I don't know, maybe a year from now we'll be saying, remember when you could go cover conferences before the decade-long quarantine?
Yeah. I went to Conscious Life, which is a new age and sort of alternative healing expo here in Los Angeles. Obviously on the other side of town from where I live. I don't live on the New Age Healing Expo side of town.
What is is that the west side, I'm guessing?
That would be the west side, yes. That's where that would happen. So I took 4 trains and a bus to the healing side of town. Conscious Life has been going on since 2002, I want to say. And then its precursor expos that were run by other people have been going on since well before that. There was one called Whole Life before that went on for quite a while. So, it's the best place to see what is sort of new and happening in the world of alternative healing stuff before it hits Goop. And then it also, unlike every other sort of alternative healing expo, it also has a bunch of UFO stuff, which is what I find so intoxicating. The sort of place where those two worlds meet each other is very interesting.
Yeah, it is. And it's... I guess there was always something of that in the 60s psychedelic kind of era going into the 70s. There was a lot of crossover with consciousness and religion and psychedelics and magic mushrooms.
Yeah, there's sort of a place where all those things kind of meet, and there's this, I wrote about this a little bit, but there's this kind of like thread of what I called mystic Christianity that runs through a lot of the UFO stuff. It's basically where the UFO stuff meets the angel stuff, meets the healing oils type of behavior.
So, are you talking about the essential oils that people...
Yeah, like, I mean, not Young Living, because Young Living is a little bit too sort of suburban and like basic for this crowd. But yeah, you know,
I don't know a lot about this market. Let's jump back for a minute, because some of our listeners haven't left the desert in a number of years, and and this may be the thing that shocks them into never leaving again. But what is Goop?
Wow. Oh, yeah. So Goop is the kind of new age lifestyle platform that was launched by Gwyneth Paltrow, the actress. And so it's a website, and it sells stuff, and now they have a TV show on Netflix. It's all very alarming. It's sort of a mixture of harmless nonsense and like less harmless nonsense is basically how you could characterize it.
So they're selling things. Are they selling?
They're selling a lot of
conferences or?
They're selling products. So right now I'm just pulled up the Goop website out of curiosity. So the thing that people have heard about is that she was selling these jade eggs that you're meant to put inside your vagina for toning, but you're not actually meant to put them inside your vagina. It's like
for
a bad
toning?
idea. Toning.
Toning. Sorry.
Yeah, like a Kegels type thing. But so she got fined a bunch of
Who the
money.
hell is Tony?
Yeah, we're getting really deep into it now.
I only know Goop from when it was a newsletter when I still worked for Gawker.
It was a newsletter. Yeah, no, it's way beyond that now. Yeah, they were selling these what they were called jade yoni eggs. A task force made up of prosecutors from a bunch of different counties in California investigated the yoni eggs and found that Goop was making sort of misleading statements about them. Like there was no scientific basis for what they were claiming the yoni eggs could do. They said they could balance hormones, regulate menstrual cycles, prevent uterine prolapse, and increase bladder control. They can't do any of those things.
They were making medical claims. They
were making medical claims.
Quack on the radio selling.
Yeah, you really
medicines.
can't do that. Yes.
And
you're really not allowed.
I assume they got out of it because she's rich?
Mm-hmm. No, they were fined $145,000 by this task force in California, this government task force. It's like a settlement, basically. So they're paying this fine and then they're reimbursing customers, essentially. But, Goop is worth like several $100 million. So I don't think it is going to hurt Gwyneth too much.
Boy, I wish these attorneys, these watchdogs would find out about what's going on out here in Joshua Tree.
What's going on in Joshua Tree?
In Sedona. Oh, they're making some elaborate claims.
Are they really?
Yeah.
I was a little surprised again at Conscious Life. I had somebody telling me that this pine oil blend that he'd put on my tongue was going to clean my pineal gland, which, no, I don't think it is, to the best of my knowledge.
Have you had it checked?
You know what? I haven't, honestly. I don't know about the state of my pineal gland right now. And I actually don't know that I could find out. So you know what? For all I know, it's cleaner than it used to be.
Maybe, yeah.
But, Conscious Life is kind of nice because it's like, it's up a lot of sort of Goop level claims, but minus the sort of money and glossiness and celebrity backing. And so for whatever reason, I find it less irritating. I find it more sympathetic when it's just a bunch of sort of lower level, significantly odder people.
Would you say that the people who go to something like this are, I don't know, more active and involved in their whatever their pursuits, their esoteric pursuits, than say the the ones who were just buying the really expensive stuff out of online catalogs, or are they roughly the same?
So. I would think that if you're sitting through, multiple panels every day about whether angels are connected to aliens, or, preventing amnesia during your reincarnation process, or spiritual purification using far infrared saunas, like those, I would guess that you're pretty committed. You're pretty deep in it.
How much does it cost for a consumer to go?
Day passes are like $40. There's a bunch of different kinds of passes you can get, but then, there are a bunch of special panels that you have to pay more money for. Like I went to see this panel called Ancient Secrets, and it was Linda Moulton Howe, who I'm sure you know, and a bunch of people who've been connected with Ancient Aliens, the TV show, and America Unearthed, and they all talked about, the cover-up of our true history. And so I had to pay like an extra $15, I think, to learn about the cover-up of our true history. Yeah.
And that was in your Vice article.
It was, yeah. That was a good one.
What's the headline of the Vice article so people can look it up?
I think it's something like America's biggest New Age expo is just trying to keep things from getting weird.
Good. Yeah, I did not see that when it first came out, so I just read it when you were talking about it the other day.
Yeah, I went, so I went because I had gone there in 2017 when I was writing my book, because my book is about conspiracy theories, and a bunch of people that I hope to write about were at Conscious Life. So I wrote about this sort of conspiracy element that's always been present at Conscious Life. A couple years ago, a few years ago in 2015, they had a conspiracy panel that was like Jim Mars and an InfoWars guy. The following year they had a anti-vax panel. So there's always been kind of a undercurrent there. But the founder of the expo, Robert Quicksilver, sort of told me that he doesn't like the conspiracy stuff. He got rid of it. It's not there anymore. But, it is still there. So I was kind of exploring that tension this year about why it is when you have alternative healing and UFO stuff, why some of the darker conspiracy stuff comes in. Like there were QAnon guys there this year.
Oh.
Yeah, they were, again, though, guys who I guess sort of don't want to be affiliated with the proper QAnon movement anymore. It's sort of fracturing the QAnon people. They're kind of going in a lot of different directions.
It's like a messianic cult, isn't it?
It looks that way to me, but I guess I'm not a cult expert, but certainly to me, QAnon seems like it is premised around a day of judgment that is yet to arrive, and like sort of unshakable, somewhat alarming faith in a leader who is said to know all and see all.
Right.
So that doesn't seem great to me, but
and there have
again,
been,
what do I know?
We're speaking tonight on Desert Oracle Radio with Anna Merlin, the author of the critically acclaimed book on modern conspiracy theories, Republic of Lies. Did I say it right?
Yeah. That was good. Thank you.
So you are a knowledgeable person about this stuff. And what struck me about QAnon, which I have not followed closely because, unlike you, I'm not paid to do that, so...
No, there's no reason to do it, really.
I don't have to go that far into that particular lagoon, or swamp, I guess you could call it. But whenever I have checked in, it's very specific stuff, and with specific dates. And then the dates come and go, and... whenever I see that, I'm reminded of like Seventh-day Adventists or Jehovah's Witnesses, who all had in the Great Awakening these deadline days, these days of judgment, and then they pass and they gotta get around it. Christianity itself had to deal with that. Right, they gotta redo their math. Right, and they have to change the meanings, It's like, well, he's not literally coming back, Right. Yeah, QAnon definitely has a lot of that. And again, I'm only sort of paid to follow them, so I just kind of duck in and out. I'm not there are these guys who have a whole podcast just about QAnon stuff and developments in QAnon stuff, and they're very good at it, but I could never. God help me. Oh, no, you need some oxygen now and then.
I mean, I do my best.
So,
I sometimes feel like I am sinking, further and further into something else. It's called QAnon Anonymous, by the way. It's a very good podcast.
oh, okay.
Yeah, it's very fun and good. But yeah, I feel like I have stuffed my brain with so much weird stuff as it is that maybe I should, leave some space for something else, like read a novel occasionally or like open a window.
Right. And this is something that happened to you at Conscious Life.
Mm-hmm.
You had a describe it. I don't want to put a title on your
on the thing.
Yeah.
So I should say that I guess I didn't have a strong version of the thing at Conscious Life, but I started thinking about the thing, and the thing is essentially this awareness that I've had sort of periodically throughout my life of this other place. Like I always think of it as the other room. That is the terminology I have for it. And sometimes something will happen. I will become aware of this other room, this next room that feels like it is a place beyond my conscious reality, beyond my current reality. And it feels like it is a mysterious place that I don't fully understand, that I can only see sort of through a crack in the door, and where I'm not there, and I wouldn't be myself if I were there. It's very hard for me to describe, but it feels like a different plane of existence almost. And so I was thinking about it at Conscious Life because, as obviously as skeptical as I am about most things, just by virtue of my job, I also do have these glimpses of the mysterious, I guess I would call them. And I'm very interested in other people's glimpses, which is what, like, High Weirdness, the book, is about, really. It's about 3 very intense mystical experiences that 3 very different kind of 70s visionaries had. Like what I'm talking about and what I'm sort of inarticulately trying to talk about is something that a lot of other people have glimpsed too in a much more realized form.
Yeah. And going into an event like this one that you were recently at, where and I'm convinced, even if you're a true believer in one of the things, you're skeptical about a bunch of other stuff that you go by. Like, you might be there because you believe, bay leaves will, I don't know, cause reverse aging or something.
Sure,
and
yeah.
that's your
There's
thing.
Kind of reverse aging.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And you go there, and then you walk by, like, the people who think it's spearmint, and you just kind of like, oh, children.
Right. I mean, that is a big thing there. I was thinking about this because there's a bunch of different people who claim to be ascended masters or kind of evolved light beings, are something more than human, seems to be what they're implying that they are.
Right.
But when you're in an exhibition hall and there's like 5 of them and they all have booths, right near each other, surely you have to think at some point, like, well, they can't all be ascended masters and light beings and, otherworldly, not quite human creatures. Like that can't be possible.
Yeah, and if they were, I don't know, that seems like the poorest way to get your work done, to get your message out.
To get your message out. It does. It seems like the long way around, I guess, to stand there in a conference ballroom at the LAX Hilton handing out, one flyer every 15 minutes.
Although, I'm reminded of, like, Paul in the New Testament. He'd go to these markets, and at the edge of the market, they'd have people preaching the various religions or traditions in these cosmopolitan cities. And now and then he'd go do that, and they'd beat the crap out of him.
Huh.
And especially if he started off, because one of his traditional things was to say, look, I'm a Jew just like you. He'd go and talk to a group of Jewish people.
Sure.
In their section of the market, on market day.
Right.
And they'd be like, oh, all right, how you doing? And then he kind of sneaks in the, actually, I'm not anymore, and then they get all pissed off. It's like, come on.
They would get mad.
Yeah. So they'd stone him and whatever. So I guess they don't stone people at Conscious Life, but I guess if nobody's at your booth, that's kind of the modern...
People at Conscious Life are wonderfully open to a wide variety of different ideas, is what I would say. But I mean, I've seen this too in conspiracy communities. There are ideas that seem to me to be very much at odds with each other, and people manage to sort of make space comfortably for a couple different things at once, is how I would put it.
Yeah. Which is kind of nice, to run into people and they're just kind of friendly about everything. Yeah, burn sage.
Yeah, sure.
Queen of the universe, light beings, guardian angels, whatever.
A lot of mediums. I did run into one of the mediums and I said, what do you think about all these other mediums here? And he said, I don't think there are any other mediums here.
Oh, so, real kind of democratic debate stuff.
Yeah, it was, it was very, very similar. Yeah, I ran into the Lemurian Fellowship, who I wasn't familiar with. They're a mystery school in Ramona, California. I don't know where that is. I think they are literally like off of a little highway somewhere, but they're a Christian mystery
mountains of San Diego County.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So they teach whatever it is they teach through a correspondence course, and they were very pleasant. They were all wearing matching polo shirts.
Oh, how sporty. How's San Diego?
Very sporty. Yeah. And I asked them a couple questions, and then they handed me a booklet, and they said, all the questions you're asking are in the booklet, which, fair enough.
Was it true?
Yes, it was. I was absolutely asking really stupid questions. Basically they teach that there are teachings in place that can be sort of accessed by this group of wise elders called the Elder Brothers, and you can sort of find them through this correspondence course. So yeah, everybody at Conscious Life is kind of approaching a version of what I approach sometimes, this other room, this next place, and everybody's other room is a little different, and some people have managed to get the door further open than I have, but seemingly, a lot of people are looking for it. You've said that you've had experiences like this throughout your life, that they're not something that you can actually call upon or predict when they're going to happen. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. A lot of these schools, the Rosicrucians in San Jose, there's lots of variations on this kind of theme. Say that you can train yourself to do it, right? And with some simple kind of smoke and mirrors, like literally candles and mirrors and meditation and that kind of stuff. And I don't doubt that other people are able to do that, but
I'm sure
it has not worked that way for me. I think I can convince myself, maybe, all right, maybe. But it's quite a different thing than when you get blasted with something. Like, where did that come from? That was not there.
Right.
It was dropped into my head, and now I can't get it out of my mind for 3 years, 2 weeks, whatever it is.
Right. Yeah.
Now, psychedelics can help, apparently.
So I hear.
I didn't have any great luck with that most of the time. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It was like, finally I did have one through what turned out to be some absurd accidental overdose.
Right. You said of LSD?
Yeah.
And what was it like?
Oh, it was... It was overwhelming. It took a very long time, both in our timeline and some other ones. And while I certainly don't remember all of it, I came back with some very clear memories that were real experiences that I remember as clearly as I can remember anything memorable in my waking life.
Right. What kind of memories?
Oh,
if you're comfortable talking about them.
I think I wrote about it at some point, you know. Probably on a blog, and nobody read it because they were racing to get to the comments.
They really probably were.
Yeah,
People love to comment.
I had this habit at Gawker because I was so bored writing about things, and what I would do is I would write about whatever the thing was that was topical, and then by the end I would just kind of veer off into what I was actually thinking about or reading about or whatever at that time, and it would just go in this total different direction, and only very rarely would anyone ever notice.
Actually notice. Yeah.
And so
I actually read
fine.
some of your old Gawker blogs a while ago. They were good.
Were they? I don't remember.
Yeah, they're very good. They're very respectable blogs.
It's all I wanted was to be a respectable blogger in this world.
You wrote a very good one about Bigfoot that I enjoyed a lot, which was essentially that people really care about Bigfoot and they don't actually give it about, actual wildlife or saving actual wildlife.
Oh, I don't remember that. But
it was great. Yeah, I don't remember why I reread them, but yeah.
Thank you for actually reading some of them. You're one of the few.
I excavated them. I had a friend who was working for a media company who will go unnamed, and she didn't have a lot to do. They didn't really know what anyone was supposed to be doing at the media company. And so one of her jobs was to write these captions for these videos. She was appearing in these news videos, and then she had to write captions. And the captions were they were descriptions in like the YouTube YouTube versions of the videos. And the descriptions that she wrote were just nonsense. They were just absolutely deranged. And again, like no one ever noticed. Her bosses never said anything. I don't think anybody ever actually saw these videos. They just sort of existed in some other plane.
It didn't help us, It did not help.
No, it didn't help us. It didn't fix media. It didn't fix media, and now we have to sit here and talk about our psychedelic experiences on a podcast.
You're listening to Desert Oracle Radio, and this is your host, Ken Lane. Tonight we are having a late night conversation with the author and journalist from New Mexico, the land of enchantment, Anna Merlin. We have a link to Anna's book, Republic of Lies, on our website, desertoracle.com. The sounds you hear are from Red, Blue, Black, Silver. You're listening to Desert Oracle Radio, and this is your host, Ken Lane. It was Haight Street. It was the Lower Haight where I lived.
Oh, yeah.
It was 22 years ago, and one of my roommates, we had this fantastic Victorian that had 5 or 6 bedrooms on the second floor, and then parlors and dining rooms and kitchens on the ground floor. And it was a wild neighborhood. It was where all the bars were in that area, like Mad Dog and the Fog and Tornado. And
I like Tornado. I used to go there.
it was they were just right there across from each other. On payday, the Irish used to roll out and just brawl in the street on Friday nights in their ties. You know, they all worked at Nestle or something.
Of course.
And there was Knock Knock, which was kind of right under the house.
Oh, I didn't know that
one. That was a very groovy kind of underground one. I did 96 to about 99, I think.
Oh, yeah, that's before my time. That's before I could get into bars.
Yeah, it was. Although you probably could have around here, you know, as long as you didn't come in, I don't know, bleeding, they'd usually let you in.
As like a 10-year-old, do you think that would have been fine?
I think so. Yeah, it's very much like kind of a Jack London kind of thing.
Had I known.
One of my roommates was a deadhead.
Ooh.
A very sweet guy. And he had in the freezer a bunch of liquid lysergic acid, a bunch of liquid LSD in like eyedropper bottles.
Oh boy.
And so, because I made a lot of consistently wrong decisions in my life, I was running a news website at the time out of that house with another guy who also lived there. He had moved into the house. It was very cheap to live in a place like that. And
I bet.
a house I looked recently because I was walking through the neighborhood when I was up there visiting, and the house next to it, which was similar but not quite as ornate, was renting, I believe, for $12,000 a month.
Sure.
I don't know what the total rent was then, but I paid $300 a month for my room. And
God.
We had the use of another room that we used for an office. So we're in there working late at night, and I get sent down to make some drinks. So I go down and I'm making up some Greyhounds, good healthy drink. A lot of vitamin C,
Yeah.
a lot of ice for hydration, a little bit of vodka.
Sounds great.
So I'm making those up and I'm putting the ice trays back, and one of these little bottles kind of rolls out onto the kitchen floor.
Oh boy.
And I pick it up and I see that the cap was not really put back on all the way. So there's this kind of frozen mush around the lid.
Oh boy.
And yeah, it was just one of those nights. I looked at it and I thought, I wonder if there's anything in there or if it's just like frozen condensation or something. And so I just ate it and forgot about it. And about, 15 minutes later, which is a little quicker than these things usually, work, unless it's DMT or something. I'm typing, and I notice that there are kind of like electric rays coming out of my hands.
Sure. The strong blog, yeah.
Yeah. And I just kind of looked over to Charlie, who was working at the other end of the office on his computer, and I said, I'm not going to make it. You finish up. So apparently, as I'm kind of walking out, he says, what did you do? And I guess I told him. I don't even remember. So, kindly, about an hour later, he knocks on, or maybe it was 5 minutes later, he knocks on my bedroom door and he leaves me like a pack of cigarettes and a liter of water. Very kind. I smoked cigarettes at the time, so.
At the time. I hope you don't anymore.
No. You
can eat all the condensed LSD mush you want to, but just don't smoke cigarettes.
I gave it up. It was the 90s. Everybody smoked in the 90s.
Yeah, even me, and I was 6 years old.
See? I'm sure there are.
I want to hear what happened with the LSD mush.
So what happened with that was, for the initial part of the experience, I don't physically remember being there. Now and then you read about this stuff, and someone will say, "Oh, I felt like I was at some sort of molecular level," and that was very much the case. Although I remember parts of it pretty clearly.
Oh, yeah.
And then coming out of it is when I had 8-10 hours later, is when I had these sort of set piece memories. And the one in particular went on for what felt like many hours in real time, and possibly that was the case, because it was all night. And it was just such I thought it was kind of a stereotypical scene. And while it made an impression on me initially, I think in the maybe year or two or three after that, I kind of dismissed it because it seemed kind of, it seemed like a little too much. It was like, with a lot of kind of like ancient themes.
Okay.
That I found archaic even from that standpoint. But there were entities.
Okay.
And there were two of them. And there was a whole kind of lesson presentation.
Oh, how nice of them. Like a PowerPoint. Yeah.
Yeah, like that PowerPoint, yeah. It was, this is kind of how ridiculous it was, is that many years later, when one of my kids wanted to watch one of the Marvel movies, Iron Man, like 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, I guess. I think it was the first one. Well, there's a thing where, to show how rich and technological Robert Downey Jr. is, they've got all these kind of make-believe display screens.
Right.
And there's one that kind of fills a conference room or a control room. I don't remember what it was. And I remember seeing that, and I had just about fallen asleep, as I always do in Marvel movies.
So do I.
It's like a time for a nap,
It's a great time for a nap. I've had incredibly luxurious naps in a variety of very expensive movies.
A movie theater with good seats.
Yeah.
It's kind of like listening to one of those machines that makes it sound like waves or something,
It's an
except it's
absolute white noise
explosions.
machine. I love it. It's
Yeah.
really, I can be a supportive partner and also take, a solid 3-hour midday nap in a bucket of popcorn.
You don't get that too much in this world.
You don't.
So it was something like one of those big stretched out kind of screens that you could touch, but your hands went through it. And it was something like this, but it had no gadgetry or anything. It just appeared to be kind of a window in reality or something.
Okay.
And it had, the two of them did not speak verbally.
Right.
You'd look at them and they were speaking to you in what you could understand.
Right.
But they did not talk, which is apparently something consistent with these
With
kinds of
UFO
encounters.
stuff. Yeah.
And with gods and angels and everything else, It's like
Yeah.
the voices in your head.
Right. Yeah. And you're able to communicate telepathically and yeah.
Yeah.
Or they communicate with you rather, and sometimes you can communicate with them.
Yeah. So that's what
Yeah.
so it was like that. And I had spent much of that decade working in Central Europe and Eastern Europe and these areas that were always on the verge of civil war or actual war, like Kosovo or Slovakia and Czech Republic. These were some places where I worked. And it always seemed, maybe it's just kind of from being dumb and knowing less and being younger or whatever, but it always seemed, not just to me, but to all of the reporters I knew, that these obsessions with these battles that happened 800 years ago, where no one was within 15 generations of knowing anyone who was alive at the time.
Right.
But these were the reasons that would be brought up in these ethnic struggles and these political battles and these national splits and these civil wars. And they would sort of direct me to kind of touch this kind of map.
Huh.
You'd see this whole scene, this historical scene, and generally it was incredibly mundane. You'd be looking, I don't see anything, and then in the distance you'd see two people walking or something.
Right.
And then other ones were very dramatic. It would open up and there'd be some plane in the Balkans or something, and there'd be cavalry on horses and stuff, and it wasn't representational. It was like you were looking at it from above or from just outside or something. To the point that years later, when I go through history books that covered anything that I remembered from that, I'd kind of stop at the pictures and illustrations. It didn't look like that.
Didn't look like that.
That looks
So
fake.
basically, they hijacked your consciousness and showed you sort of a presentation about world history.
Yeah, except not really,
polite.
not informational though. Really,
Right.
It was, but it was just this sense of that time and things that people were doing in time were not exclusive to one time. It was like this explanation that time wasn't linear, and for a while I wondered what's the point there, because we know theoretically that time doesn't have to go just in one direction, but that's how it happens to go for us, so who cares, But what I noticed is a couple of years later, I started becoming aware that I was getting intuitions. And the intuitions were future. And I think I started, maybe I had them before and I didn't really pay much attention to them, or they were more buried, and there's been a remarkable amount of writing about intuition, considering none of us really knows how it works.
Right.
But you can do kind of cover things for your intuition if you're not superstitious. The whole gut thing. My stomach kind of hurts. I don't think I want to go in there. And then you leave and the building explodes,
Right.
Your stomach was fine, but you had to have a physical excuse to listen to your gut.
Right.
So that's about the most sense I've been able to make out of those kind of vision teaching kind of things, is that when those things started coming up over the past 20 years, I tended to pay attention to them and not be dismissive.
Because you had seen them before and you understood that maybe they had a context that you weren't aware of at the time. Well, that was very considerate of them.
I think so, yeah. And I wonder, how much of that is chemical, and whether or not the McKenna brothers believe that the chemicals would kind of bulldoze open some parts of your brain that modern society is closed off.
Right.
But when you're talking about this other room, what are there experiences associated with it?
I would say that it is more that I become aware that the room exists at various times. We talked about this a little bit on the social media, but I become aware of it when I'm looking at, I have this book of symbols. It's like a Taschen book, it's an art book. So it's about different kinds of symbolism, like ladders or doors or the symbolism of different colors. And occasionally I'll become aware that some symbol is recurring a lot in my life, that it just keeps showing up. Like for years it was roses, and then for a while after that it was thistles. I was seeing thistles everywhere. And so sometimes when I'm looking at that book of symbols and I see the ways that those symbols kind of apply to me, I become aware that maybe there's something working someplace else or somewhere outside of me that I don't quite understand. I think the other room is also just a sense of just something mysterious that I don't quite know what it is yet. And it is a place where I can't go. I can only sort of stand on the hill and see it from a ways off.
Yeah.
The best that I can describe it, and I don't have any hope of ever getting there. But I mean, my sort of awareness of it is triggered by weird things, like I did start meditating a few years ago. It does sort of, again, make me aware that the other room is there, meditation. But meditation also as soon as I started meditating, I started seeing really strange sort of images that I don't know if they have any symbolism or not, but that's what started happening pretty much as soon as I started doing it, is I just started getting this flood of different kinds of images.
Any you want to share?
So some of them are from my childhood. Some of them are this field next to a river I spent a lot of time in as a kid and that I still go to when I am home. That is sort of, I always see it at sunset for whatever reason, and I don't know why I get taken back there so much. But the other is sort of, I had one where I became aware of the roof of my mouth as the roof of a cathedral.
Oh.
And those two things started to seem sort of the same to me. So it was almost like my sense of scale changed and became both dramatically larger and dramatically smaller than in my normal life. Or I became aware that my breath was exactly like the wind through the trees. Again, like these sound like sort of extremely boilerplate sort of stoned musings of somebody who is on a lot of psychedelics, only they didn't happen when I was on psychedelics.
Right.
They just sort of happened. But mostly I think that I become aware of this other place as a way to remind me that there is stuff that is uncanny and unknown and unseen and things that I can't quite touch, and it prevents me from being impatient or snarky when other people talk about theirs. And it makes me more sympathetic to people who are seekers than I might otherwise be.
Yeah, which is good to have empathy for what is a very common, although always exceptional to the individual, but a very common pursuit, the pursuit of meaning, of worth, of existence outside of whatever it is we have to do for so much of the time, and
I mean, existence outside of the self also is how I think of it, because as I said, like the other room is not a place where I am, and it's not a place where I would exist as I am now, as Anna, so I do think that we get shown these, maybe what we're talking about is this experience of the collective unconscious, and I'm just being obnoxious and not finding the right terminology to describe it, even though the terminology already exists.
Well, but the meaning of these terms, the meanings aren't consistent over time. They change with who's using them and how much they're used. Mm-hmm. So while there was a very therapeutic idea from the Austrians that there was a collective consciousness, then it sort of dropped out of favor, out of kind of intellectual bohemian elite, and then this stuff has kind of come back into culture again.
Right. this idea that you can glean something about this collective unconscious place from dreams or from imagination or from symbols that recur in your life that you can, or, symbolism, Jungian symbolism, that you can find it or find glimpses of it somewhere.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And there's the clinical Jungian approach to, well, it exists. We can call it collective because it's a shared kind of reservoir of picture ideas and things like that. But then there's the more mystical part, which the private Carl Jung was very interested in.
Yes.
Which is that the collective consciousness, collective unconscious, whatever term you want to use, is actually a way to access data outside of your time. Where all things in one form or another have either exist in the future or exist in the past, and that you can get glimpses of these things. So it's not just things can come out of it. And the things that come out of it are so personalized because they have to be interpreted by the individual that it's often hard to make much sense of them. And then occasionally people get driven absolutely nuts by it.
They do.
Yeah, your Ezekiels and Isaiahs, these people who really just kind of lose it because they can't turn off the flow of whatever this information that they're receiving is.
Right, from somewhere else. I mean, and that's also kind of the idea behind the Akashic records, is that there exists somewhere this compendium of all the knowledge that ever was or will be, and that you can access it if you, clean your pineal gland or whatever it is.
Right. And but it's common to all the mystery schools. It's when you're a Rosicrucian, which I never finished, but I read all the material and I did do the spiritual exercises and stuff for over a while. You're not supposed to talk about the specifics.
Got it. Okay. I won't ask.
I think it's mostly just because any sort of thing based on initiation is supposed to have some things that they kind of roll out gently to not freak you out.
Right.
Pretty much any kind of OTO, mystical tradition that I've found to be shocking or surprising or anything. And I think the only people it would surprise is maybe people from a time when everybody was Christian or something. When the whole romantic thing comes up and they embrace all the old gods and the pagan stuff, and
they loved it.
Yeah, they loved it, but it was also shocking because you could show breast, and that was very anti-Victorian, and it was all kind of wild, even though they were sitting there on quilts drinking tea at picnics and whatever.
They were. I mean, I think it was all just an excuse to have orgies, but that's also fine. So the Rosicrucians didn't do it for you, though?
Well, I didn't disagree with any of it.
Sure.
I think this stuff has to be reborn constantly because it's too weighted down with the culture of the time when the materials were presented. So for the Rosicrucian order, they started publishing about a century ago, I think, from San Jose. And then there were other orders before that, and they kind of...
Right.
And it's just kind of like, it's I don't know. It's not mystical in its presentation to me. But a point that they make, and that's common to all these things, is that there is a kind of sanctuary in time and space that we can access. And when you're there, you're kind of in this wild data stream that ignores the constraints of time.
Yeah.
And you are able to go into this kind of non-physical realm, and that there's really data running through it. I think that's their point and most of the mystery school's point.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
And I believe it. It's I've had ridiculous intuitions about specific historical things. I've written them down. I've shared them with people, and then sometime later they happen.
Wow.
And it's one of the big ones personally for me was Occupy Wall Street. I just had these dreams and visions for weeks, the December before 2010.
Wow.
And they kind of wouldn't leave me alone. And I thought, well, God, I guess that's inspiration. So I wrote a little novel from it.
Wow.
And which is supposed to be a common thing with being creative. But when you actually try to be creative, you find out it doesn't happen quite so easy most of the times. This one did. This one was like, sit down, we're dictating. I was like, all right.
Wow.
And so I wrote the whole thing like that, like kind of in a trance, It was,
I've had that maybe half had that, once, twice at most. That's really special.
It was interesting. It was the most interesting part, I think, was when some of our mutual New York comrades started posting on Twitter when Occupy Wall Street started.
Right.
And there was a day or two where it kind of went from scorn to, something's going on here. And that's when
something's happening.
Right. And that's when they occupied Zuccotti.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw those first pictures at night of that rectangular concrete thing, all those people in there and the walls of the Wall Street buildings on either side, it was like seeing a picture of an old friend. I was, good God, that's it. I didn't know where it was. I said it in L.A.
Wow.
Those scenes. The book Dignity is what I'm talking about. And I said it in L.A., and then the aftermath of that, they're in the Mojave Desert. So it's...
Oh, I want to read that.
It's, I don't know what to think. But people liked it.
No.
Some people liked it. It was honest. That's about the most I can say for it.
I would like to see that.
But it was, as soon as I saw that, I thought, Jesus, I gotta go. That's the place. I gotta go. So I was out there a few days later and stayed for 10 days. And right after I had to come back, Bloomberg had his urban assault military units come in and ran everybody out of town. But, of course, or back to whatever dorms or wherever they come out of. And of course now we're still playing that whole scene out, because the result of that was the whole Green New Deal, Democratic Socialist thing. And then you have Bloomberg back too. It's beautiful. So
everything old is new again.
Yeah, especially old people.
That's true. Absolutely.
And that's one I'll admit to, because everybody knows it happened, and since the book was published 6 months before Occupy, I can say,
right.
Yeah, dismiss it or not, but I think millions of people got blasted with that same thing.
Interesting, that same sort of preview.
Yeah, and that's why because you've covered a million events that are supposed to be a protest or something. Half the time nobody shows up, and usually when people do show up, it's very like work a day. All right, set up our tables, and then we'll leave when we're asked.
Right.
You only get these kind of things like every decade or so in America.
Yeah, it's rarely sort of touched with whatever we want to call it.
Magic.
Yeah. That is how it felt. I was there. I was living in Texas at the time, but I was there for that first march over the bridge where the cops ended up corralling everybody, sort of kettling everybody on the lower level of the bridge and arresting a bunch of people, which got a lot of attention. But it felt like something else. It felt like something different even then.
And then, of course, the might of the real world can usually kind of stomp out that sort of romantic stuff that swells up every now and then, at least for a while.
Right.
But what do you think about physical places to kind of help open up those windows or doors?
That's a good question. Do I think that people have better access to those places in like Sedona or something?
Anything like that. Yeah, it could be. For me, I usually think about wild places. Like Muir said, the Sierras were the cathedrals of the West. I
guess as a person from Santa Fe, sometimes I'm allergic to that idea, because whenever somebody tries to tell me that some place sits on top of a ley line or something, and that's why it is receptive spiritually, I get I get angry. But,
Are they wrong?
Yes, they're wrong about Santa Fe sitting on top of a ley line. I don't know. It seems like everything sits on top of a ley line.